The storm doors slammed, and there was commotion. I learned at a young age that you hear more if you pretend to be asleep, so I did just that when Grandma rushed down the hall to check on us, before hurrying back down the dark hall toward the light of the living room. The late-night visitor was their daughter, my aunt, clad in nothing but nightclothes. She had been assaulted by her estranged husband. In between sobs, she told them that she had escaped after her husband tried to take a knife to her throat. When he had gone for his gun, she managed to flee. As she sat in her parents' house, shaking, she was terrified that he'd come for her. Grandma called the law, but in a rural county such as these parts, the law could be miles and miles away. While Grandma dialed it in, Grandpa silently strode into their bedroom. His every step rang simultaneously with anger and with careful purpose. He quietly opened his glass and wood gun case, removed his shotgun, and strode back through the living room. From there, he went right out to the front porch, sat on the swing, and cocked it. As I listened to him rock rhythmically, creaking back and forth in that swing, I never felt safer in my life. I fell into a sound sleep. I later learned that Grandpa sat on that porch swing until a deputy arrived nearly 40 minutes after Grandma's call. People were expected to be able to take care of their own, with prejudice. I didn't know it at the time. It was really the only world I knew. But the Ozarks were different. It was a place different from other parts of the country, where you cannot be prevailed upon to do anything without the aid or permission of the government. Where my family is from, it never occurred to us to outsource our self-defense to a distant law enforcement entity that had huge rural counties to cover with just a few deputies. It also never occurred to me that our grandparents' or parents' firearms were toys with which we could play. We knew what firearms were, and that you can't unpull a trigger. We were taught that lesson from the very first moment we could walk. Guns aren't toys. The lesson about guns was so ingrained in our communities that people had them in gun racks in their pickups without any fear that a child might grab one. That was unheard of. My grandpa's own handcrafted gun case didn't have a lock and was used more to display his collection than to keep them locked away. Our parents taught us not to touch a hot stove, not to run into the street, not to play with guns. Most important, we were taught a respect for life. You don't put your finger on this unless you're fixing to kill something, my grandpa once sternly told me as I trained the barrel of my cousin's BB gun on a He-Man action figure. When we moved to the city, I was shocked at how many of my friends weren't taught this. My mom kept a loaded .38 revolver in her nightstand. I knew it was there, and I knew that I was to never mess with it except as my last hope of defense. I mentioned it once to a girlfriend during a sleepover. She was shocked and wanted to see it. No, I told her. My family also taught me respect for privacy. My mother will ask you to leave. And that was the end of that. Living in St. Louis, I didn't need to hunt for my own food since supermarkets were minutes away. We had a few guns in the house for security, but that was the extent of it. It wasn't until I got active in politics that my life and the lives of my children were threatened that I got angry. Kids can tell when their parents are afraid. They can sense when their safety isn't assured. I never wanted my family to have that feeling. I wanted my children to feel as secure as I did that night at my grandparents' house, with my grandpa keeping watch on the porch, creaking away on his porch swing all night long. How I learned to fight back. I began blogging on politics in 2001 under a pretentiously ridiculous handle, Catalyst. I was 20 years old, struggling prematurely through a midlife crisis, and working out my political evolution online. I created a website with some friends and wrote about politics and pop culture. It received a fair amount of traffic and made the lists of various promoters and publishers and PR flacks who constantly sent me materials. We covered music, interviewed some A-level indie artists, attended screenings, and penned film reviews. We wrote about politics with an unaffiliated, libertarian-infused, independent conservative perspective. By the time I had my first child, as most mothers would understand, I didn't have the energy to keep up with the site anymore. Plus, many of my friends were getting married and moving away, so it didn't make sense to continue. But I learned a lot during my stint as a web publisher. During my time as Catalyst, I experienced how nasty the internet can be when empowered anonymous nobodies sitting in their bedrooms and hating the world think they can